5th. So, no, on February the 26th. Okay. The continuation of the meeting of February the 5th. Okay. Let me go through the protocol. Do we, I don't, those are the minutes. I got to look it up. But Petra usually has a list here for me.
I mean, we can take roll.
Okay.
Say the roll has been.
Let's take the roll. John, would you take the roll, please?
Ms. Marshall,
I'm present.
Ms. Devine,
Present.
Mr. Babinek,
Present.
Mr. Iwan.
Present. Thank you. Comments from the public? I seeing no comments from the public. I still need to get to the agenda. It's on my computer.
Here, I got a printed one.
Yeah, give me a printed one because then I have to go back and forth.
You guys want a printed one?
If you have another
I
one,
have extra here.
thank you.
Okay. The first order of is old business, the zoning text amendment and zoning permits. Zoning permits. And this is an item that the planning director has added to help clarify where zoning permits shall be required. John, would you like to present that? We do, yeah, we do, but I was
Yeah.
gonna wait till. Yeah, Sandy makes a good point, is that I jumped over the approval of minutes, but we're going to approve the minutes when Joanne gets here, because she had some comments on it, okay?
Oh, do you want to defer?
I'm gonna
to-
defer that to later in the meeting.
She is coming.
Yeah, she said she was at the doctor's, but she was gonna be here.
Oh, okay.
okay.
I didn't
I thought
realize,
she
I
was
thought
not
she was
coming.
not coming at all.
Oh,
Yeah, I thought she wasn't going to make it by the time we were, but you want to defer to next meeting, we can do that if that's the desire.
let me ask, what do you guys?
Fine with that?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay.
So just make a motion that we defer till.
I make a motion that we defer the approval of the minutes of February 5th until the next meeting.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Approved.
And you also have the January, just for the record.
Should we do the same thing for January?
Yes, I defer. Could I have a motion to defer the approval of the January 8th meeting until next meeting?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. So our first business, or
I'm a
old
rookie at
business
this.
rather, carries over from our February 5th meeting. This is a text amendment, proposed text amendment affecting sections 12-165 and 12-374. 12-165 is zoning permit section. It is the section of our code which highlights the requirements pursuant to when a zoning permit is required. And what this proposed text amendment does is just add clarity for two specific items that we do technically review, but we wanted to make sure it was codified in the process. And so that first one is just fences. We have seen a couple of times over the years where fences are established, even in the new construction, as part of a new construction. However, there have been instances where folks have been beginning to submit for a fence or something of that nature that's not captured. So we just wanted to make sure that it was enumerated in this list so that it's a little bit more clear. The second is the erosion control devices and docks as specified within this article. So we have added docks and erosion control devices. Historically, you might be aware or may not, but those who are new, we do have a key location dock ordinance within our code. That key dock location ordinance provides locations of where docks may be permitted on the island. It's pretty unique for most jurisdictions to have an identified map of where these docks can be permitted, whether they be fixed docks or floating docks. And so this just marries to that language that allows us to codify specifically that now a formal zoning permit would be required, because we already are reviewing those docks as they submit to the state for approval. We're not approving the state's permit, but we are reviewing it in ensuring consistency with our local key dock location ordinance. The second part of that is the erosion control devices or structures. So think about bulkheads, think about retaining walls near the critical area. What we want to do with this particular ordinance here is allow for that review process to be within our zoning permitting process. And so as an applicant does apply for a bulkhead, as an applicant does apply for an erosion control device, that we ensure that they submit to the town. And that can occur simultaneously as they submit to the state, if it requires a state permit. If it does not, we still would have it baked into our code that the town B is able to review that. The second component of this ordinance modifies section 12-374, which is our definition section, and it adds just specific language of what an erosion control structure device is, and that reads: a barrier that prevents or reduces soil erosion. Examples of erosion control structures include breakwaters, bulkheads, groin jetties, revetments, and seawalls. So that just adds a little bit clarity of what is anticipated to come for review if there's any question of what an erosion control device may be. As part of this application, you will also see a recommendation that impacts the actual municipal code. So this is not within the zoning code itself, but in the municipal code, Chapter 2, bank retention systems. And so right now we have a process to where the applicant would submit their simultaneously to the town, and it enumerates to the town administrator. Staff is recommending that we modify that to the planning director and codify DHEC's new name, which is the Department of Environmental Services, so that it's consistent with how we review any of those similar type erosion control devices. And so for you guys as action today, I would recommend that you have a recommendation to approve the text amendment, as well as a recommendation that would allow town council to make modifications to Chapter 2 of the municipal code. Also in your materials, it's just kind of support documents. We showed a couple reference cases, well, at least one particular case, and it just gives you a little bit clarity. I'm going to just show just a few of those images here. If you can see on your screens, this is an example of a project.
And we don't have it on the screen, John.
You don't? Okay. Neil, are you able to share what you have to them? Thank you. This is an example of a bulkhead that's been proposed. As you can see, the area, that's the green line. That was the
We get it on this screen?
No.
Oh. Good? Okay. The area and the green line, Gene, you were able to see?
Yes.
Okay. The area in the green line is the approximate location of the critical line in 2005. And then you can see the new critical line that was recorded in red more recently. That shows that the area in black, this bulkhead is being proposed in between those two locations. If this was a permitted project by the state that was just in the critical line area, there have been times where that applicant may have just said, hey, we don't even need to engage the town. But this ordinance amendment would require them now to make sure that they are submitting to the town formally. So I just wanted to kind of give you a snapshot of, we do want to make sure that every application is submitted to the town for review.
Yeah. John, can you go over the discussion we had where you explained to me, what the impact on the neighboring lots is, what this is a primary reason for this?
So in our 2023, when the town adopted its comprehensive marsh management plan, one of the recommendations from that marsh management plan was to really look at how we regulate bulkheads. One of the impacting effects of bulkheads is, particularly if an individual property owner goes in and establishes those, is that water now is forced to go adjacent opposed to up on the highlands. And so now that impacts the adjacent property owners. And so how do we kind of deal with that? This allows us now to engage with that property owner saying, hey, are you able to at least talk to the adjacent property owners, not necessarily get official buy-in or support for it, but understanding that this particular project would not have any downhill impacts to that adjacent property owner. So for our staff review, one of the things that we'll be doing is ensuring that they engage adjacent property owners when this does come before review.
Yeah, as I recall from our discussion, DHAC even will permit that, and they don't concern themselves with the adjacent properties.
Right, DHEC will notify everyone in that area. They will receive a public notice, but there isn't a requirement for them to say, well, is this having a true downhill impact?
Okay, and the next thing is that, and what are some of the things that you would perhaps recommend to the property owner who wants the bulkhead to help mitigate some of the neighborhood impact?
So for this particular case that you see right here, before this was actually approved, we walked the site. We met with the engineers on site, and in your materials, you'll see some photos that the engineers had actually provided. And one of those photos includes an image that's myself, I think a representative from KICA, as well as to the engineers on site, really trying to identify how do we problem solve. This was a pretty challenging lot. You can see on this image here, the rear deck of this is less than 10 feet away from really where that vegetation changes. And so when it originally was submitted to DHAC or DES, their comments were that this really was not induced by tidal flooding, and so it was hard for them to issue a formal permit from the state. And so, but however, we know that flooding occurs at the rear deck, and you can see where the washout occurs so close to the rear deck. And so how do we problem solve to allow this property owner to still protect their property, but not necessarily impact the adjacent property owner? So what we do, to answer your question, Mr. Iwan, we would suggest living shorelines or some hybrid hard and soft structure, which would require the ability for them to put in some type of bulkhead, but also add some additional vegetation where it might be feasible. Every case is going to be a little bit different, and so when we, pertaining to this amended ordinance, what we want to do is be able to just have that conversation and say, hey, have you already tried to do a living shoreline here? Can your engineer prove that a living shoreline just won't work in this particular site conditions?
And is a living shoreline the addition of vegetation?
Yeah,
Where
so
we see the erosion now?
a living shoreline, or some examples of that. I wish I had some images in here. I don't have any, but I think if you've been on some of the pond edges or Envirolock, that's a type of living shoreline. They have sometimes the plastic cells where they'll plant additional plantings in them to help, and those root systems kind of interlock together to kind of form a more hardened structure to allow that to take the wave action or reduce wave action. Did I kind of answer your question there?
Yes, thanks.
Any more questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, John, so do we have any can you hear me okay, by the way?
Yes.
Yeah. So do we have any standards for how the bulkheads or revetments are built and where they're sited? Because, you know, so I live on a marsh, right? And the critical line is always changing. In 10 years, if one of these neighbors needs a bulkhead, right, because they're getting erosion on their property, it's going to be a hodgepodge of some that are going 10 feet out into the marsh, some going 5 feet, some going 15 feet. Are there any standards for how these are placed or when they're done?
That's a great question. During the development of the comprehensive marsh management plan, one of the recommendations is that we look at areas holistically opposed to individual properties. And that's just a timing, a coordination effort, like trying to get property owners aligned. It's a difficult task. Some see or experience erosion at a greater rate than others.
Right.
Some just don't believe in wanting to add any additional structures. They want to maintain this natural feature. So it's really a difficult job. We've tried to at least begin an education process, but really the question just, Gene, is how do we mobilize these different areas to begin to want to do something collectively? We did have a conversation with the state, I think that maybe was 2 or 3 weeks ago, and one of the things that they shared with us is that it's difficult for them to permit an entire area collectively without those individual property owners applying to the state independently. So it's also a administrative sort of challenge of how do we permit a project. Let's just say if 5 to 7, 10 property owners in the same area wanted to apply for some type of structure together, it would be really difficult for the state to try to be able to permit that without kind of looking at it property by property because of the critical line being dynamic. It's just for their, so I've recommended that if we can continue to engage with the state of maybe that's something that we can handle on the local level. And even though they're permitting it individually at the state level, is there something that we can do at the local level that at least will help us look at it, properties collectively together? But it's just a difficult challenge. I mean, it really is to get property owners aligned. I would recommend, if you're asking just to recommend regimes or neighborhoods to kind of query areas of concern, we've identified those areas in our marsh management plan of where we know some of those erosion heightened areas are. It's just how do you approach the property owner saying, hey, your property may be at risk. It's an investment. Is that something the town willing to provide some subsidy or financing to help do? Those are all questions that we would need to really bring to the table.
Okay, and as part of this process, when we're talking about engaging property owners, how active is that? Is it a letter going to them? Are we actively soliciting feedback that they support it? What's the process that's being done to engage property owners in the case, with the one up here on Old Dock?
That's a good question. For this one, we've just asked the property owner to reach out to adjacent neighbors. We haven't sent like a formal, hey, we see this area as an identified problem area. Do you guys want to come in and talk about it? We've not done that to date. For individual applications that we get notified from the state, we will have that applicant say, hey, have you at least reached out to your adjacent property owners to see their, or have any conversation or dialogue to see their input, objections, concerns, that type of thing. But we haven't done any, what I would say, campaign or initiative to really begin that.
Is that a required part of how you'll evaluate or approve? Or is that just a recommended good neighbor approach?
It's a recommended good neighbor. It's been a best practice for the town for us. We do it with our Board of Zoning Appeals of cases where we know that an application comes in, if they have general support from adjacent neighbors, that's favorable to the property owner. And so we just encourage it as a best practice.
Any other questions?
My only other question is one of unintended consequences. So this feels very logical and a wise thing to do, particularly in context of the marsh management plan, which I'm sure we'll learn more about. But is there any downside? Obviously it's just one more step that the homeowner needs to go through. One more kind of sorting through a maze of, is it the state, is it local, is it this, is it that? Is there anything on the downside that we really should consider?
The downside, I think, until we really establish what actual criteria are like different things that we would say, if let's just say we head down a road of now we have criteria for when we would reject a bulkhead. Right now, we don't have anything that says, well, because you've done this, we're going to deny your bulkhead. That would be the slippery slope that I say as a kind of unintentional consequence where when an engineer says, well, this is the best solution, and the town now says it's not approved. Now that property owner is in a pickle. They'll say, well, the town said no, but I want to be able to protect my property. What are the next steps? Is it filing an appeal for the decision? Which that's the standard practice for any permit that we approve. So that doesn't so much worry me. It's just having, after this step, I'd really want us to begin to investigate or at least establish what are those metes and bounds for how do we engage to encourage, discourage, what site conditions do we consider? I think there have been some models that we've looked at in other communities where they have some guidance, even the state, we've leaned on them to kind of say, hey, what would be your guidance to approving or denying a bulkhead? And I would want the town to be able to establish, okay, is property preservation the number one goal? Is it the natural environment the number one goal? Like, what are those, like kind of identifying some priorities to help staff kind of evaluate these.
And then, how many, like, is this something that you expect a lot of instances of? Or, and in concert with the marsh management plan, largely kind of relating to that?
We did we did an analysis of the bulkhead permits over the last years, and it has been increasing. In fact, I think over the last 5 years, it's doubled. So it is something that we're going to continue to have to look at.
And that would be consistent with the rising waters.
Yes.
Do we think it's doubled because people have actually gone through the steps they were supposed to go through to put one in place? Or do we think the need has doubled?
I think the need has doubled because our records are based on state.
Okay.
We get notified of state permit
Okay,
applications.
got it.
So we went through, and they actually went through the process to install.
And then one just quick question. This goes to really both of y'all. All of this is very individual. There are no kind of standards that we can put into place so that somebody, when they applied for their permit, could demonstrate that, you know, they've checked this box, and because of this, it's that. I'm wondering if there's a way to streamline things at all, or is it just too individual?
Well, I think we've been working with Kika because
Right.
in a lot of cases, Kika controls the property
Yes.
adjacent that they're going through, and looking at encroachment permit for them to go through. And basically, we're asking the engineer to state they're aware of our design with nature, our marsh management plan, and our desire to do living shorelines, and acknowledge whether that will work or not.
Okay.
The other thing that I'll add to that is the Conservancy produced a design solutions manual, I think right around the time that or just before our marsh management plan. And so that document we've used as a tool, or at least an education guide, to kind of help inform the community. Like, it gives recommendations of when bulkheads and green infrastructure solutions are available. So I think the answer short is no to your question. but-
So, John, following up on Sandy's point, is that when you start having specific, you're saying you don't have anything specifics yet that you can deny that you're going to create. Will these go into the zoning regulations?
Yeah, so right now it would be an application, and one of the things I did not kind of expound on, it's in your materials, was, I'll give an example that I think maybe to help, is when we do get notified from the state of an application, and so prior to today, and it goes back even to how we look at docs and whatnot, the state will notify us that, hey, there's been a permit application in for a bulkhead. What we will do is look at that, review that bulkhead. Because we don't have any things that say, well, this is something you can't do versus can do, what we would do is engage that property owner. Have you tried a green solution for this location? Our response to the state is that we reference our marsh management plan. And so we send a letter to the state saying, hey, we think that there are other alternative solutions to be able to address erosion concerns. Can you have that property owner contact us and discuss their other options? And so we provide that letter to the state, and what the state has been pretty favorable in, or at least.
No, I was looking ahead to the point where at some point in time you implied that you're going to have some
sometime in the
reasons
future, yes.
to deny. And then where I was going with this is that those have to come back through the planning commission in order to make text changes.
Yeah,
So we'll have a chance to review the particular criteria that may deny one.
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
At this stage, it could just be a policy, kind of a policy that we have direction and guidance, but if any particular standards are in place in the zoning code, that would come back before you all.
Any more questions? Gene, you okay?
All good.
Okay. So, John, from what I understand, we need two motions. We need one for the motion to change the language or the text in the zoning permits, and the second one to change the to make the change to the code ordinances.
Correct.
Okay. So at this point, I will ask for a motion to, do we want to read you guys want to read the specifics? Or have the red line stuff that they're adding?
If you guys have comments or questions about the red lines, I mean, you can just make a motion to approve as is, or if you want to.
Okay, that's good. We'll do that in the discussion part of it. So we'll make a motion, then we'll do it, then we can discuss it, and then we can vote on it, okay? So the first thing I would ask for is a motion to approve the text change in the, to section 12-165 of zoning permits. Can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, second?
Second?
Okay, discussion. From my perspective, I see you want to add fences, and then you also want to add docks, erosion control devices, structures specified within this article. So you're adding those, and you're also adding a definition.
Correct.
Okay. Any questions or discussion on that from the commission?
Well, the fences part doesn't concern me, and I like the idea of permits. My concern is that without standards and guidelines, are we getting ahead of ourselves in the permitting process?
For fences, we do have some language already in the code for fences. For erosion control, for docks, we already have standards in the code. Erosion control devices would be the only thing that's not as far as actual standards that are in the code.
Okay, okay. So on
And
the
that's what
first
we were
time-
talking about. Sometime down the road, you may put standards in there.
Correct.
Okay.
So on the first two, I'm fine with the permits. Then it's just on the erosion controls where I have some hesitance that we're requesting a permit for something for which there are no standards.
Did we want to approve pending your reverting with the standards within some period of time? Is that possible?
I don't think we can have conditional change to the text.
Yeah, so if I ask you a question, Gene, you would want us to have at least something more guidance other than what we've been leaning on right now in our marsh management plan, more technical requirements of when a bulkhead should be permitted versus not permitted. That would be sort of an involved process because we want to be able to add in criteria that allows us to look at each site individually. I think there's some easy low-hanging fruit, like requiring the property owner to reach out to the adjacent neighbor, requiring that vegetation or landscape plan be submitted, like some really, what I think, low-hanging fruit. It comes back to, I think, Sandy's question earlier of the unintended consequences of us, I don't want to use the word preventing, but if we were to deter or deny a permit, I would want to know what are those specific reasons why we are denying that permit, because it could be challenged from a standpoint of where we're just trying to protect our property.
So again, I'll go back to the point we made just earlier, is that all those will come back to us for approval. So, when he starts introducing these specific requirements, then they'll come back for text amendments at that point in time.
Correct.
Right, but couldn't we have standards too, like on the rate of erosion or the rate of move of the critical line, something really objective on which to approve or disapprove
That's
a bulkhead or erosion control device?
Yeah, I mean, rate of erosions, those things are what I think the applicant is already doing in the state's application. So we could consult again with the state to see what requirements they're submitting, and technically we can duplicate what the state's requirements are.
That would help, yeah.
I think that's an opportunity as well.
If we're duplicating what the state requires, why do we need to do it?
I think it's always helpful to have the local eyes, the state, in good faith, not disparaging their review process, but I think once it gets through their system, having that local context, and it's better record keeping for us so that we also know in the future where these problem areas are, has these solutions worked.
Just trying
We
to
can,
wrap my head,
and
are
we
we
can
just making
always
it more
go
complicated?
more restrictive than the state. That's the other
Yeah,
option.
no, for sure.
So I just want to remind that what we started earlier talking about, the state is only looking at the property, the
Yep.
property and making, it
Exactly.
doesn't,
So if nothing else, we need to do it to protect all of the property.
that's
owners.
correct,
Got
on
it.
either side. Any other questions? Gene, are you okay if we approve this without the specific standards, knowing that we'll have those come later?
I'd rather wait for those standards to come, honestly, but if you guys are in the majority, that's fine.
Yeah, I think it starts the discussion, it starts the process. So I'm okay, because we're not putting anything in there to deny at this point in time.
Right,
Right.
it just seems a little bit arbitrary, and that concerns me in terms of any standards we're using to approve or deny something. I'd rather see something objective with respect to, we approve this one, we disapprove this one, it has or does not have an effect on a neighboring property owner. These are, the guidelines we'll use with respect to how it's offset from the critical line or whatever other measures we use. It's just, that's where my head is on it.
Got it. What do you think, John?
No, I mean, it's a pleasure to commission. I mean, if we want to be able to come back and develop what I would say a baseline criteria, I think we can identify some really simple low-hanging fruit. But if we want to go more extensive, like engineering metrics and certain dimensions and sizing, that's more of an exercise. So I think if want to go pretty quickly with this, or really taking your time to really go down a more engineered, that's a different time scope. So I just want to get guidance from you all of what's your thoughts there.
Yeah, my thought is that I think we need to start the dialogue. And as you heard me say several times at this meeting, on these meetings, that I think we have an existential problem with water. And I think that starting the dialogue, knowing that it's not, first of all, that we don't have anything to deny, so we don't have any criteria. So it's not like we're going to stop anybody from doing anything that they're doing now.
I think that the ordinance just definitely would allow us to be a little bit more intently focused on saying, hey, we want you to be really capturing some of the policies that the town are venturing on, particularly in our marsh management plan. Right now, we're only sending that to the state. So the state, in their, like I said, they've been pretty good partners with us to kind of defer to us, have you engage with the town. But this allows us to at least directly engage with them before even independent of getting notification from the state. So it would allow us, in my opinion, to start, as they're going through that development process, we can begin to educate them, begin to say, hey, are there other alternatives? And putting the onus on the engineer and the property owner, saying, hey, if this is your desire, that's fine that it's a revetment bulkhead, but can you show us that a living shoreline doesn't work? Can you show us that other alternative can't be created in this particular situation? So at this stage, it's more of a policy direction that staff is administering. Yeah. And although it's not in the criteria, we can, the next phase of this, we can bring back criteria.
Okay. Based on the conversation, no further discussion. We can call for the vote to approve the text amendment to 12-165. All in favor? Aye.
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 All opposed?
No?
Okay. 3-1, the change to the text amendment passes. Now, the second one is the change of the town ordinance. And basically, as I read the changes, it's just moving the responsibility to the planning director and away from DHAC to the Department of Environmental, fully detailing the name of the Department of Environmental Services. So those are the two changes, right, John?
Correct.
Okay. Can I have a motion to approve the changes to the Code Ordinance Article 17, Tideland Management, Chapter 2?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second. Discussion. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the change to the 17-201 is approved. Okay.
The only other thing for discussion on today's agenda, Mr. Vice Chair, is our planning outlook for 2025. We just started discussing briefly at our last February 5th meeting the various items that were priority items for the town in the planning department. A number of these are already begun to be in motion, and so I just wanted to get you guys' commentary again more formally on some of these items, if we need to add any or bring to the top of that list. As you all know, the one that has been a growing pain for staff is a comp plan and trying to get that through the beginning of the year. The other item from a planning initiatives, these are all things that are what I'm identifying as required by state law, is the our comprehensive beach management plan. So that's another endeavor that will intake this year as well. That has been done in coordination with Jim Jordan, who's our heads our environmental department, a wildlife biologist, and CSC, who's been a consultant for the town to assist with that particular project. But those are the two plan documents, if you will, that this year we'll undertake. When it comes to plans and initiatives or things that are focused around resiliency, there's a number of issues: our stormwater management standards, our marsh management plan, and continued education. Those three things, we've taken a real priority for resiliency, and as Mr. Iwan stated, of sort of water focus. With our stormwater management plan, we'll have a conversation later today. As you all may remember, in July of last year, we put forth the initial recommendation that council gave first reading to. We anticipate that will be in the near future, bringing back the initial phase of how we manage, or at least address stormwater from a water quality and water quantity standpoint in our zoning code. As proposed now, and that's a stormwater application that the applicant would be required to submit as part of their permitting process. And so at some stage, we want to be able to advance that to where there's engineered metrics to support their stormwater runoff. The second component to that, or not second component, to phase 2 of our marsh management implementation plan, that whole work group is being restructured right now. We've, to date, in implementation phase 1, the biggest priority, or 3 priorities at the time identified, one was just education and awareness to the community. I think we've done a really good job of trying to at least educate the community. We still have to continue that effort of really showing and demonstrating why the marsh is a critical natural resource for the town. So that will continue of our education, whether it's through not just the town, but our other entities and other partners on the island.
John, may I ask a question here? Is that, how is the marsh management plan incorporated into our planning and the function of the town? I mean, do we refer to it in any of our documents as something that we are working toward or working with?
We've in our current version of the comp plan, we've referred to it as a reference document. So, and town council has adopted formally as one of our executing documents. The recommendations that are specifically in that marsh management plan have now materialized to various ordinance updates or policy decision changes that town council has enacted.
So ultimately, we will get those recommendations to the planning commission for what we just did to text
Similarly,
amendment.
one of those was the pervious surfaces.
Got it. Okay.
Another, technically this bulkhead, the buffer requirements that you'll see next week, like these are all being generated through that particular plan. So like I said, we're moving. It seems slow, but we since 2023, since that's been adopted, there are another
So
initiative.
conceptually, the marsh management is an extension of the planning
Of the
department and bringing things to you
Correct.
for us to consider. Okay.
Correct.
John, can I ask a question in the other direction on the comprehensive plan? I've gone through it multiple times. There are so many recommendations, big ideas, all kinds of thought process there. But what I haven't been able to kind of lock into is how that coalesces in terms of what's next. And maybe that's what this is. So it feels like there's kind of this parallel thing with the marsh management plan that's now generating initiatives and actions. Is the reverse true, or will it be true from the comprehensive plan that all of those ideas will get boiled down and prioritized, or is that sort of inherent in everything that we see here?
Yeah, it's not a loaded question, but it's a fair question of how do we take all of that, all those recommendations, all of those things that are in the comp plan and put it in a day-to-day kind of objective. It's, some of it is organically, some of it happens intentionally. A lot of it depends on the discretion of town council and their objectives and goals that they want to establish for the year, prioritize. During our retreat, we identified a number of those things that they want to be able to accomplish this year. So many of that is driven by town council. Staff has always had a number of recommendations listed for us to act throughout the year. It's, for Kiowa, it's pretty unique that I think where we are in our development phase, the two priorities things are our biggest, water and resiliency, and then us just updating our current code to reflect where we are sort of on the development phase. Do we have a list of what's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? I don't think it's that simple, but I think we do have a general direction. Like, we want to be able to get some of these big button items that affect the things that affect the biggest, what I would say, things that may occur this year.
Wouldn't it be helpful if the comprehensive plan moved to some sort of summary that gave kind of the big action items? And recognizing that that's a roadmap and those dates might change, but that we that we kind of had some projected time frame to address that issue.
Yeah.
And that would also allow us at the end of the comprehensive plan to say,
This is
how did we do? Did we miss anything? Do we have unintended consequences? It would help us also evaluate how well we've done.
Correct.
To
Yeah.
hopefully make better choices in the future.
Yeah, so if you look at our current comp plan, there's a recommendation for time of when things should get done, whether it's a 2-year time frame or within a 5-year time frame. There are some things that are listed there, so we can do that exercise. We did it for this was 2019, I believe, following the flood mitigation and sea level rise report that was produced. We came back and made updates to the comp plan to reflect some of those resiliency efforts in there. At that time, the mayor and I worked on sort of a priority list of things that we should identify. So it was in tandem with council, like I said, and staff. But I agree with you.
Yeah, I think we're kind of coming at it from two different sides. I don't disagree with anything you said. What I've spent some time with the comprehensive plan too, and it's quite large, which it's almost overwhelming for. I'm not sure how many people would sit down and really read it start to finish because of that. So it seems to me that it needs to at some point, and I'm happy to whittle away, but we need to get more concise. But we also need to see that the action items from it, and action items is a very big word, I don't mean a simple to-do list, probably should fall out of it more clearly. I'm not sure after several reads that I walked away with that.
And I think we haven't talked about this, but a lot of sympathy for how long the process has already been. So
Yeah.
like the last thing we want to do is
No, for
add
sure.
any more
No,
hoops to it. But it feels like the final, mile to the curb here would be just a final section that pulls out, doesn't try to invent anything new, but just sort of summarizes and kind of builds that roadmap.
I think we're in violent agreement. So, John, is it still intent on the agenda for next week to discuss the comp plan status?
The status, yes, be
Okay.
very brief though, I'll let you know.
What's that? I'm sorry?
Be very brief.
Okay.
But yes.
So we're not going to have
But
the,
what I think is warranted is this conversation saying, hey, direction from the planning commission is ensure that's baked into this next, when we do sort of touch it again, like we have a priority attached, a priority
okay.
function attached to it.
My purpose, my reason is that we need the base first to work from to do this summary.
Right.
We don't have that yet.
Right.
Yeah.
Can I just add one thing? The last comp plan I worked on, we did, took all the recommendations and did short-term, mid-term, long-term. And you just say short-term is 1 to 3 years, mid-term is 3 to 5 years, long-term. And so then you have that summary of the recommendations in it. Doesn't tie it to a specific date, but it gives you.
I think that's a good, there's several approaches. That's a good one. But again, we need to get the base first before then we can start giving
Exactly.
some,
Right.
you know, so we can then synthesize it and give recommendations.
Duly noted. I won't spend too much time on the other two big ones, the regulatory changes. As you all know, that we anticipate, once we get through the comp plan, to do a full update of our zoning code. But advance of that, there are some targeted, what I would say, specific items in the code that we want to go ahead and begin that process. One of those is kind of, well, three of those I think are already in motion. One is the review of our communication towers ordinance. Right now, we've been in the process of meeting with tower companies and providers to really understand their needs and objectives of how do we improve coverage across the island. We understand that our code is a little bit antiquated, and so that's in motion. We anticipate, hopefully, I don't want to jinx myself here, by maybe mid-April, something will come back before you guys, and in sort of a text form, if you will. The use table, our use regulations is something that needs to be rescrubbed or refreshed. And so just looking at the entire use table and our use regulations, and that's just permitted, conditional, special exceptions, those types of things. Sandy and Joanne have been working on that. I've started that as a small work team, and I'll share an update next week meeting on sort of next steps and kind of where we are in that process, and allow them to kind of gauge you guys as a full commission your thoughts. And the last is sort of more what I'm bucketing as more the process and administrative. Two of those things will be on our agenda next week. And just for y'all, that's going to come out later today. We're putting the final buttons on that, but it's, I want to let you know, you guys should be receiving that today for next week. That includes development agreement procedures and buffers and our lot coverage ordinance. So these are what I'm bucketing as regulatory changes. There are going to be some others, but these are kind of what I would identify as sort of the priorities in the first few months of the year. And then as far as formal applications, we've anticipated a couple of these already, which would be a new development agreement with the golf resort, as well as a planned development application for the Upper Beachwalker parcels. So no official timeline on that, but those conversations have been had, or at least beginning to had, either with the community or with members of town council. So that will come before you at some time, I believe, this year. Are there any things that you guys think and maybe we don't have to go through that discussion based on us looking at the comp plan and then maybe setting those things?
I think that would be a
Okay.
good sequence.
Okay. That's all I have then.
Any correspondence?
The only thing that I will update is that as you all may be aware, it was this month. I'm already in March. Orange Hill Plan Development went before Charleston County as a workshop. That won't be on their March Planning Commission agenda, but we probably anticipate April for them to come back for a formal recommendation. There was not generally too much opposition for that, but they've reduced a lot of the density in that plan development that was previously approved in the early 2000s. And so that's one project. We have also a meeting with the Endell West folks this week. And so we'll probably get an update of where they are in their design and development process, where they are in this particular stage. All the other development projects are moving pretty swiftly. On the agenda next week that you'll see, there are some subdivision plats that are attached to the Cape Point service vehicle access that was proposed as part of the site
Mediation.
plans. And so those are what I would say the next phase of developments that are occurring. If you guys have walked down there recently, you know that they are nearly complete with the turnaround for Southern Pines. Those are all, the tennis facility has gotten approval, Roy Barth for their expansion. Those are all of the sort of development updates, I think, that are.
John, is there any update on what is Central Road, now what do they call it? The
Main Road.
Main Road corridor. Has anything been updated on that? I read something in the paper about we don't have the money anymore.
I maybe thought I shared with you guys, maybe it was, I didn't share, maybe I shared it with town council, and I can send you that update. But Charleston County Council, I think it was their second week of February, one of the county council finance meetings. Essentially, staff made a presentation and identified that there's no more funding available for that project. So like I said, that segment C is effectively dead because in the words that were used, it's because the referendum failed, that even though it was previously stated that the new absent tax sale had nothing to do with the finance for that, and the previous one would have fully funded it. So it's kind of ironic, but effectively segment C right now is dead. If you've been driving Main Road, you'll see that they've already begun mobilizing in active construction for segment A, which will be from Bees Ferry to Chisholm Road.
But what they said is there's no money for segment B now.
I encourage you guys to reach directly out to county council. No, I mean, when the full project was presented, segment B, which is the middle portion of that, the commentary was that this segment improvements were not needed because the engineering showed that 526 would have alleviated the traffic needs for segment B. So that was eliminated from the sort of priority list. So they focused on segment A and segment C. Segment A has been advancing as a design build, and so like I said, that's been moving forward. Segment C, which I would say to the counties, I'm going to use the word credit, but there was some general concern of the actual design. I don't think there was a general consensus among the community of what should occur for that particular segment. So I think they utilized that as another reason of why maybe this was not moved or advanced as quickly as it could be. A lot of opposition to some of the trees or rights of way being taken. But nonetheless, it was a priority project from the 2016 half-cent sales tax that we understood at the time that was going to be funded.
Okay. I see no comments from the citizens, public comments. So commissioner comments. Gene, do you have any comments?
Only comment / question is in terms of election for another officer. Possible to have that in the March meeting?
I was going to ask John about that. John, how do we need to do we need to just put it on the agenda or what?
You can just add it to the agenda.
Yeah, add it to the agenda.
Yeah.
Okay.
Beautiful.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Sandy?
No other comments?
Mary Beth?
I'm good. No
Good.
comments.
No comments from me. Okay. I'll have a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion to adjourn.
Now you can say your second, Gene.
Oh, second.